يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. صلوا. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. صلوات.
Please recite a Surah Fatiha for Shaheen Abid bint Sayyid Abid Hussain Zaidi, Sayyida Marzia Hassan bint Sayyid Sibti Hassan, and all of the Marumeen. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى الطيبين الطاهرين. صلوات. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال لم أقل إنك لنا تستطيع معي الصبر. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, He said, did I not say that you could never bear with me patiently? This is from Surah Al-Qaf, verse 72. This is when Khidr is talking to Hazrat Musa and asking him, after he tells him that I'm going to do a series of things, if you want to reach the level of knowledge that I have, if you want to reach me, I'm going to do a series of things, make sure you stay patient. And as he did those things, Musa questioned him, and he would reply with this. Imam Hassan, one of the biggest allegations that unfortunately still persists today is that people ask that why didn't he rise? These are allegations that went on at the time of the Imam, after the Imam, and still unfortunately are going on present day. And what do I mean by that? Why didn't he rise against Muawiyah the same way his brother rose against Yazid? Now I'm going to explain that allegation is completely false. Imam Hassan was one of the bravest Imams, and he did rise against Muawiyah in battle, in army, the same way his father did, the same way his brother did. Imam Ali alayhi salam, Muhammad, he was martyred in Ramadan. Now some people ask, was the Imam delaying and fighting Muawiyah because of Ramadan? The Imam it was incumbent on the Imam to get rid of corruption. So he wasn't delaying for the sake of Ramadan, but he was delaying because he had a less number of people in his army. So in Ramadan, in the year before he dies, there are a series of battles that happen beforehand that kind of leave the Muslim society extremely tired. The Imam Ali alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Ummah at the time had went through the battle of Jamal, the battle of Safin, the battle of Nahrawan. At this point, his Ummah is really tired. They're starting to complain. They're starting to say, we're done with battles, we're done with fighting. Oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, our swords are bent. It's a direct translation, our swords are bent. Basically implying that we're done. We don't want to fight. The Imam has roughly 65,000 people. Imam Ali alayhi salam has roughly 65,000 people. Muawiyah has roughly 400,000 people. Imam Ali is still on the quest to defeat Muawiyah, as he is still spreading corruption. He's still trying to take over the Muslim ummah. So in that year, at that time, Imam Ali decides to send a letter to Qais. Qais ibn Sa'd is the Imam's wasil in Azerbaijan. He sends a letter, and he says, "Oh Qais, you have 80,000 people. I have 65,000 people. Come bring your people so we can finish this Quran and Taghut against Allah on the earth." Qais responds, he's bringing his people. Halfway in the journey, before Qais arrives to Kufa, arrives to the Imam is killed. Before the Imam dies, he makes it clear that Imam Hassan is next. Everybody in Kufa and Medina and in the neighboring towns, they pledge allegiance, follow Imam Hassan. Imam Hassan rises and he says, "O man and womankind." Now this is interesting. He's addressing all of humanity. He's not just addressing his people. So to emphasize that he's the Imam first and everything else second. He says, "Today a man has left you who Jibreel would walk on his right, Mikael would walk on his left when he would enter battle. And now we have inherited this moment, and I will take you. We still have unfinished business. Let's go and finish what my father died doing." So he's clearly implying that he has no intention of backing off. He has no intention of being passive. He's fighting. He's going to take, Imam Ali was doing this before he died, he's going to take it on. Unfortunately, Muawiyah at this point is becoming really fearful. He'd already lost a couple battles to Imam Ali. He's becoming really fearful of Imam Ali. So he starts sending letters left and right. He starts trying to bribe and fracture the army of Imam Hassan, the Muslim Ummah. And he takes this period where people's morality is low. They've just lost their mind. Imam Ali, again, at this time, his followers were so diminished, 65,000, and many of them didn't want to fight. We have a famous hadith where Imam Ali says that, "Give me one of Muawiyah's followers, and I'll give you 5 of mine." He's referring to how he had to beg on the street for people to come and follow him. He had to send invitations for people to come follow him. People barely came. And now he passed away. So now there's already a little bit of a, we didn't want to go, and now we especially don't want to go with Imam Hassan. Muawiyah starts sending letters. The way that the Imam Hassan's army is situated is that there are some warriors in Kufa, some in Medina, and then there's the general army that's going towards Sham, that's going towards Muawiyah. There's a front piece, there's a middle piece where the Imam resides, and then there's a back piece. And these are miles apart. They go in 3 stages. The front part of the army receives a letter from Muawiyah. Now the captain, the commander of that army, is Ubaydullah ibn Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. So he's his cousin, Imam's cousin. Muawiyah sends a letter, he says, "Oh, Ubaydullah, there's 1 million dinar waiting for you, just leave him." Ubaydullah takes it, not only takes his army, takes the front portion, not just defects, but takes it all the way to Sham. So now he goes all the way and joins the Muawiyah's side. Now the back portion also receives a letter. Again, these are miles apart, so it's not like they can see. They get a back letter. The back letter gets a letter, and it's forged, and it says from Imam Hassan. And it basically says, "I'm Imam Hassan. We have decided that we are brothers in faith." He plagiarizes the signature of the Imam. He says some beautiful words about how we have decided to put down our arms, and he uses some Quranic verses. Now this is how manipulative Muawiyah was. He would say lies, forgery, etc., and then he would follow it up with Quranic verses to back him up. And any weak person of knowledge of the Quran especially people who are tired from battle, they took that opportunity. The whole backside defected. Anybody who knew the Imam, anybody who realized that his father was on this path, that he would follow this path, had no reason to think that he would defect, would easily be able to see through it. They almost took this as an opportunity to defect, feigning ignorance. So they folded, they defected. Now the Imam in the middle. Now they are starting to get restless. They realize they're on the front part, they're on the back part. They're starting to get restless. They start to have tension and they start to defecate. They start to leave. The Imam starts summoning people from Kufa and Medina, and the Imam is left with 3,000 people. Now imagine this ratio. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He had roughly 72 to 110, give or take, against 30,000. Imam Hassan alayhi salam had 3,000 to 400,000. And he's still marching on. He's still going forward. He reminds the people. He said, don't forget about the Battle of Hunayn. They had 8 people around the Prophet. One was a lady who had the strength and the will of men, of great men. She wasn't going to leave her Prophet. 8 people against 4,000. Quran mentions this, how they ran away. But when you have Zulfiqar on the battlefield, it's irrelevant how many numbers you have. So Imam was ready to go. He's still marching on. But when you have 3,000 people, the way that Imam had 3,000 people, he had the most unloyal, hypocrite, conniving, backstabbing. So much so that a man rushed the Imam, in his own cavalry, rushed the Imam and stabs him in his leg, stabs him in his thigh. When the Imam is leading Salah, someone comes and stabs him in the back. So the Imam is getting backstabbed, literally, figuratively, in any concept. He's getting stabbed in the back. So the Imam is now left with very small numbers of true followers. True followers. The Shias are extremely small. It's almost reminiscent of the fourth Imam. The Shias' numbers were so small that battle wasn't even in question. The Imam is still willing to go, but he realizes nobody in his army except for a handful is willing to keep going. Muawiyah sends a letter. He says, don't make the same mistake your father did. You don't have anyone, and I have everyone. And I'm willing to compromise. I told you, Muawiyah was in fear at this point. He was ready to finish this battle back and forth between the Ahl Bayt and himself. There's an ethical discussion to be had that we won't have today about how to quote-unquote compromise with an enemy of Allah. Whether that's, what is the spiritual levels behind that, how do you perform that, etc. Because we can take that and apply it to modern day as well. Imam Hassan makes the terms of the treaty. Now, when in political science or in war theory, whoever sets the treaty is generally the winner of the outcome. So it's usually, even if one side proposes it, whoever sets the treaty is setting it on their terms. So the Imam Hassan says, okay, I set the treaty. Now, the Imam doesn't ever relinquish Khilafat. He's Khilafat from day one. And there's a difference between Khilafat and kingship or monarchy or other forms of political leadership. The Khilafat embodies the spiritual leader and the political leader. So the Imam never relinquishes Imamah, he relinquishes Imara. And Imara is this like tribal leadership. So he relinquishes that to Muawiyah. He says you can have political control, but he doesn't submit to him, he doesn't bow to him, and he doesn't relinquish Imamah. Muawiyah is considered the first king of Islam. We have sects in other sects. I would say 2/3 of the world, 2/3 of the Muslims, they put him on a pedestal as the first king of Islam. But what is kingship? There's no concept of kingship in theology. There's no concept of kingship in Islam. There's no kings. The Khilafat is the main point. So Muawiyah is just a political leader at this point. Muawiyah at this time has been sending letters to governors on how to deal with followers of the Imam. Burning houses, looting villages, boycotting them, not buying from them, not selling to them, letting them starve. not marrying into them, exiling them. So the Imam, again, he's the Imam first, political leader. So armies, wars, fighting, that all is to get close to Allah. Saving his Ummah, saving his Shia is also his responsibility. There are 16 terms given. We don't have a historical narration of all 16, but we can generally deduce them based off other works. First, Imam Hassan stops. He says, stop changing the sunnah of Rasulullah. Jummah was on a different day. Things were added, things were removed. First point was to stop this. Again, he's thinking on a theological, spiritual level. He cares about Islam, he cares about the Ummah. He doesn't care about politics, he doesn't care about kingdom. Next, he says, stop the lanat on my father. Now, at this point, Muawiyah, from the pedestal, he was advising all of his governors, advising anybody who would sit and give sermons to curse Amir al-Mu'mineen. That was the second point. Stop doing that. Third, lift the embargo on the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Fourth, he lists the succession plan. If you die, I resume political power. Again, Imam Ahmad is always there. If I die, Imam Hussein resume. It is the next. Imam Hussein. You die, sorry, I die, then you die, Imam Hussein's the next. He lists this out. Clearly, Muawiyah signed to this. He also lists some other things. There's a treasury in Darius Darajud, which had 1 million dinar. This was used for the Shia population. He said, that's mine, etc. He's always thinking of the Shia Ummah. These same people would come up to him and call him Mudlil Mu'mineen, which means a humiliation to the believers. The same people that for the next 9 years, Imam Hassan died on the 50th of Hijri, the peace treaty was signed on the 41st of Hijri. For the next 9 years, the Shia of Islam had peace. They were able to trade, they were able to marry, they were able to attend in society. They weren't persecuted, they weren't killed like they were done previously. Those same people would call the Imam humiliation of the believers. Look at these people. They would come and say, Assalamu alaikum, ya mudal al-mu'mineen. And you would reply, wa alaikum assalam. These are upright followers. Now, there is a clear difference between Muawiyah and Yazid. Muawiyah had a big turban. He had a big beard. He was a writer of the Quran. He built masjids. There was people wondering, why are you fighting such an upright follower? He was very outwardly religious. Yazid was the opposite. Shaitan took notes at Yazid's lectures. Like Yazid was gambling, drinking wine in the public, had no interest, no pretending, no outward show. He was the opposite. That's why you see the conduct of the two brothers are different based on who is leading there. You can't, fighting at Muawiyah wasn't the best course of action. If Imam Hussein was in his shoes, he would have done the same thing. And if Imam Hassan was in the shoes of Imam Hussein, he would have done the same thing. So a question sometimes gets asked of how did Muawiyah get this power, get this opportunity? We see at the time of the second, he selects the third. The third is the uncle of Muawiyah. So he sets him up in Syria. Muawiyah decides that I'm going to separate myself from the Ummah. I have no connection, I don't want to do anything. He starts building his own army, his own society on his own. Which also breaches in the question of why he was so interested in getting this Ummah that he had already said that I'm separating myself from. If there is one word to describe Imam Hassan throughout this, you see it over and over again, and I didn't point to it enough yesterday. I didn't talk enough about his generosity, but the one word to describe him was thoughtfulness. The Imam was the epitome of thoughtfulness. So much so that in Medina, when people would come to his door to ask about food or money, etc., the Imam would hide behind the door and just have a hand, just give him food. He didn't want the person to feel bad that he had seen them, that somebody had seen them in their time of need. There was a time where he was eating, and he was eating one half of a piece of bread, gave the other half of a piece of bread to a dog. And his companion said, "Oh Imam, you are at the highest status, this is not befitting of you." And he said, "I don't feel good seeing another soul looking at me hungry while I'm eating." You see, thoughtfulness. Every action he did was for the good of the Shia. The same who disrespected him, the same who cursed at him, the same who called him a humiliation. I used this verse at the beginning referring to Hazrat Qadr. Imam Hassan also referred to Hazrat Qadr. When somebody had asked him or referred to him as humiliation of the believers, he said, "My actions were not humiliation." And he compared himself to Hazrat Qadr in his story. And he said how Hazrat Qadr had done certain actions for the betterment of the people who he did those actions for. They didn't realize it, Musa didn't realize it. He is the hujjat of Allah, so every action he does is perfect, whether or not our intellect comprehends it at that time. And that's extremely important point to sit on. We've had that throughout modern day history. If you want to make a parable, obviously not to that extent, but if you want to make a parable, we have had some of our grand scholars who control or whose jurisdiction a lot of us follow. At certain times, for example, Ayatollah Sistani at certain times would give rules of peace. There was a time where there was a lot of uprising and fractions in the subcontinent, and where the Shia were ready to turn on their brothers. And he made a declaration that the Sunnis are not your brothers, but they're yourselves. He did that. People didn't understand why. And then later on, around 2014 time period, he said, "Just take up arms," situations changed. So people who don't appreciate or maybe acknowledge the scholarly status in Islam might be confused the same way that people were confused at the time of the Imams and throughout history with the other Imams. There was uprisings done by non-Imams for the sake of Shia Islam all the time. Ziyad at the time of the fourth Imam rose up. Ziyad's the companion of the Imam. The fourth Imam doesn't rise up, he rises up. There's a time the Imam knows what's best for society. Amir al-Mu'mineen did this constantly. You saw at times he was introverted and stayed at home. At times he was the first on the battlefield. No matter the odds and no matter the numbers. Because it was the right time and the right place for it. You need almost divine wisdom to make those decisions. Now today in our society, we're deeply fractured on things that are, in a grand scheme of things, very irrelevant. For example, we differentiate with one another while coming to the same masjid maybe, or different masjids, on how somebody practices matam, and how somebody practices nahas. We're so easily fractured. We have to come together, especially in Houston. We don't go to certain masjids just because they act a certain way. They don't come to our masjids because we don't act a certain way. We're already an extremely small community. We have one umbrella. You can have differences of beliefs in minor things and still come together for the most important things, and still come together as a society and as an ummah. As long as the brother in front of you has a love of Amir al-Mu'mineen, it's irrelevant what he thinks about the small things. There's a Dutch proverb that when I was researching Imam Hassan's peace treaty, that reminded me of, that trust carries on foot, and departs on horseback. It took so long for this ummah, this rise for Amir al-Mu'mineen, and so quickly it left for Imam Hassan. So, to conclude, Imam Hassan's life is not one of passiveness, as is misconstrued. He was extremely brave. 3,000 to 400,000, he stood up. When that number dwindled, he still pressed forward. He's pressed forward until it wasn't good for the believers. But at the same time, he was extremely compassionate and extremely thoughtful. He promoted unity above all else. Unity. Come together, stay together. And I think that's a reminder for modern day. I pray to Allah that this community unites itself, that we stay together, that we remember the flag that we live under, that we follow, that we remember Amir al-Mu'mineen, what he stood for, that he chose peace when peace was necessary, and he chose otherwise when otherwise was necessary. I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the wisdom to decide when is best in our own lives. Salawat.